Hey everyone, welcome to the third MicroTeach. Today we're going to be going over Module 3, which is on human development. So human development is really the change in behavior across the lifespan. So that's going to be from conception all the way to death. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. The first thing we're going to go over is really the overall debate of human development, which is nature versus nurture. Nature is going to be on the side of the genetics of somebody, the traits that are passed down, and how those are really the key to determine someone's behavior as they develop through life. The flip side of that would be the nurture side, saying regardless of any genes or characteristics that someone is born with, the nurturing of the caregiver is really the strongest determinant, the strongest impact on someone's behavior throughout their development. So that's just kind of the differences. My hope is that as we go through this, you can kind of see how really it's a mesh of both of these, that these two are very much interconnected, and that they're really bouncing off of each other and changing throughout somebody's development. It's not just one or the other. But in the first one, we're going to be going over heredity, which is going to be on the nature side. And your book goes over genes. We're not going to get too much into the gene side of everything, but it's important to know that a genome is the physical and psychological characteristics that are passed down to an offspring by both parents. These take form in what are called dominant and recessive genes, and really the only thing you need to know from that is that dominant genes can be expressed by themselves, whereas recessive genes actually need a pair of two recessive genes to be able to be expressed. And when I say expressed, it's going to be things like eye color, like whether or not you have blue or brown eyes, or hair color, things like that. So because it's genetics, and we have 46 chromosomes coming in, there are things that can go wrong, and this is going to show form in genetic disorders. And so for the argument of the nature side of things, it would be that genetic disorders are bringing in some sort of change to somebody that is going to directly affect their behavior, that nothing can really be nurtured to that. I guess that could be argued, but nothing can really be nurtured to that. It's just something someone's born with and there's no control over that. So on that flip side, then we're going to go to nurture, and nurturing is really going to be focused on the environment. And in your book goes over the environment is the sum of all external conditions. So in even the same sense of somebody who is pregnant, and we're talking about an infant here that's going to be a newborn, there's going to be teratogens, which you might think that, okay, well that's impacting them before they're born, so that has to be a nature side of it. But actually, the womb itself is very much an environment, and so these teratogens, which are just harmful substances like alcohol or smoking, can affect the womb and actually affect the child before they're born. And that just kind of attests to how you can't just look at, prior to life or continuing life of which side it is it going to be nature or nurture, and which is most important. There are ways that both of them can affect you in the very same way before you're even born. So the next topic we're going to be moving on to is going to be maturation. And maturation is going to be the physical growth and also the development of the body, the nervous system, and the brain. And this is seen in infants with their adaptive reflexes. These are reflexes that they're born with. Your book goes over grasping, rooting, sucking, and moro. We're not really going to get into those, but essentially grasping is an infant's reflex to grasp when you touch their hand. Rooting is going to be reflexive for nursing, so if you touch their cheek, they're going to turn that way. Sucking is just the rhythmic nursing of the infant. And then finally, moro is going to be reflexive hugging, actually, when an infant is startled. I would like you to know those. There's a lot more, but just those four I would really like us to focus on as the adaptive reflexes. It's important to note also that beyond those reflexes, the motor skills really are not an innate thing, and they have to be learned. They have to be perfected. An infant doesn't just start walking when you try to get it to start walking. It's a built-up process, and you can see it especially with the fine motor skills beyond just clenching a fist, like picking small things up. The fine motor skills often come later because it takes more practice to move the finer muscles in the body. But the good thing is a newborn is highly plastic, and this is talking about the ability for them to be altered by experience. So this is very heavily focusing on that nurture side, saying that because an infant is essentially a sponge, they're soaking up all the words you're saying, everything might not be going through, but they're taking in so much information that all of that can be adapted to them, which is also can be a bad thing because they can be taking in the good along with some bad on that end. But it's important to note that the infants are very plastic, and then that goes down over a lifetime. So actually, it ends up being that if you were to have a brain injury, it would be preferred that you would have it younger on in your life, because your brain would be able to better adapt to that around those circumstances than later in life when things are more established. This kind of alludes to this idea that there's a sensitive period in children where there's a certain timing that children are very sensitive to experiences, and that these experiences can be very impactful for major key markers in their life. So your book goes over deprivation, which child deprivation is really going into a lack of normal things like nutrition and stimulation that can be really just debilitating to a child because they're not brought up with these environments that really are allowing them to grow. The opposite of this would be enrichment, which is going to be an environment that deliberately is focused on stimulating the child, and it's meant to enrich and really saturate their environment so much with stimulation and activity that they're constantly learning new things, constantly growing and picking off of things. Many studies have shown that enriched environments actually are improving abilities and enhancing human development. Not so much speeding it up, but just really allowing the process to become a lot easier on the child just by enriching that environment and really exposing them to these things earlier on. Kind of going back to the nature side of things, you can talk about what is called temperament, which there's actually research showing that some babies, for whatever reason, are just born, better, so they're going to sleep through the nights. They're going to be good babies, and some not so much. So that is kind of attributing to their arousal and mood and their attention, just kind of naturally, versus something that really they hadn't learned anything starting out. We're going to move on to the next lesson here, and we're going to be going over first the social development. So we're going to be going over the attachment, and then I want to get into also the three parenting styles as well, just to clarify those and make sure we really nail them down and know what they are. So on attachments, there's going to be a couple different attachment styles. The first is going to be secure, and secure is the one we're shooting for. Secure attachment is the good one. It's stable and positive attachment where you can leave a child and that emotional bond stays intact and you can return and things are unscathed. You just continue on with the relationship. Kind of stepping down from that is going to be avoidant attachment, and this is really where there's going to be this anxious emotional bond, and there's going to be a tendency to really avoid the reunion with the parent. So there is a study, I can't remember the name of it right now, but where they will leave a child in a room for 20 minutes, come back, and it kind of displays these attachments, and children that are these avoidant attachments will really shy away from their parents. They'll face the opposite direction, not want to be picked up, really angry at the parent essentially for leaving them and giving them this anxiety that they're not going to return. Separate from that would be ambivalent attachment, where it is showing the same signs, but it's not such an avoidance to reunite, where it is just a resistance to reunite. So after a while, 5-10 minutes, these children do warm up to the idea, and they end up, being okay from the anxiety and everything, but there is this initial pause and this initial resistance to the caregiver upon return. So the reason why we want to promote secure attachment is really this this lack of anxiety that it brings, being able to be more in the rhythm of the child, and this is actually what's asked of mothers to promote this secure attachment, is being able to understand your baby's signals and things like that. Really just being more in tune, being more communicating more with the child in a way that isn't obviously with words, but just being able to understand them is the secure attachment. So next we're going to be moving on to the parenting styles, and there's going to be 3 major ones, and I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew, because there are 2 that are very close. I wanted you to make sure you knew how each one was split, and really the one that is going to be our goal in parenting. So the first one's going to be authoritarian. These are going to be parents that are enforcing rigid rules. They are strict in obedience, and they often assert a lot of power, where it may not be direct physical contact, even though it can include that. It may just be showings of I am stronger than you, I'm bigger than you, and I'm the one in control and authority here. And really these children, brought up in these parenting styles are very susceptible to low self-esteem, because they're always disappointing parents and not being able to keep these rules. And really, there is a lot of denial that comes with this obedience of authority. The next one, which is going to be completely opposite, is permissive, where this is very little guidance, very little rules. The kids are kind of allowed to just really do what they want and figure things out on their own. Sometimes parents are afraid to be authoritarian, so they back off so much that they do become this permissive, and this can create an inflated high levels of self-esteem, but so inflated to the point where there's no guidance on their behavior, and they really are just left not having anything to pull from because there were no rules set up and they're kind of on their own. The last one, which is what we're going to be shooting for, is authoritative. Now, authoritative is going to be firm guidance, but with the combination of love and affection. So this is going to allow child behavior to kind of be corrected in the ways that it needs to, so you can get it to the desired behavior, but not in a way that's so demanding to where it's affecting the child's self-esteem. That's really the easiest way to say it, is that you are controlling behavior to the desired outcome, but not so much to where the child is being affected by this sort of rule following. But that's basically going to sum up everything. We went a little over this time, but I wanted to make sure you guys really got the breakdown of all those parenting styles and those attachment styles. But as always, if you have any questions, definitely shoot me an email. But other than that, I'll see you guys next time.